man who owns the dogs calls them to order, and he walks along with me, and I'm speaking to him, and I said, I'm walking from Montreal, Manhattan. Oh, I heard you on the radio. You know, it was such a fun interview, and I have a question for you about that. And we're going along, and we're having a grand old time, and he says, where are you sleeping tonight? And I see this wonderful white cedar hedge over there, up high, beautiful 360-degree view of the mountains. I said, I'm sleeping right there. And he said, oh, please, why don't you come home with me, and you can stay with me. I said, oh, I would love to sleep there. He said, oh, but my wife died last year, and I've been so lonely. Would you come stay, please? So, of course, I accepted Fred's invitation, that being the only rule of thumb. The next morning, he was making me breakfast, and in walks Dawn Sarley, the woman who makes these coins. She introduced herself. I said, I saw you in a paper yesterday, and I wanted to meet you, but there was no contact information. And I met Fred, and I couldn't find out. I didn't try and do anything. Oh, I know Fred from Rotary, and when he heard your story, he called me and told me I should come over and see you. She said, but I have to tell you something. We had a peace activist come to our town last year, and this is a very, very strong military town. It's a very Republican and conservative area. Strong tradition of military service, and he alienated everyone in the town. The school board was infuriated. I almost lost my job. She's the enrichment coordinator. So she interviews me, she grills me, and she said, well, I'll see what I can do. And she goes away, and about 10, 15 minutes later, there's a call saying, I have an appointment for you in the 7th and 8th grade and in the 9th grade. And it wasn't until the next day when I was invited to speak to the Rotary Club, that I realized how incredibly brave that was of Dawn to go ahead and make that invitation. And I know particularly because the first class that I spoke to, I had them for an hour, and we had a wonderful time, and at the last moment, as the bell was ringing, Linda Paquette, the teacher, says, Sean, lock the door. And I thought, oh my gosh, what happened? And she stood up and she said, now students, you know, it's very important for us that we don't repeat the mistake that was made during the Vietnam War when our veterans came back and they were disrespected and dishonored. We can't have that happen to the veterans of the Iraq and the Afghanistan conflicts. And I could feel all of this recent, because when you come in as a pilgrim, as the stranger, living into the newness, you don't have the old history, what's below the surface, all of this that really makes a community go, all the memory. And a lot of the memory is pain, and a lot of the memory is conflict, and a lot of the memory is misunderstanding and confusion. The pilgrim knows none of this. He comes in innocently. And if the pilgrim is looking to speak of peace, it can be a very dangerous thing. So hearing Linda say this, I thought of Dawn. I saw her sitting there. I thought, I should hold my tongue. I should hold my tongue. This is a teacher worried about creating conflict with their students, what the students might say when they go home. And I said, oh, that is so true. It is so true what your teacher says. And I hope we will all remember that every one of those young men and women that take an oath to serve, and even take an oath that means that they should disobey orders if they're in a situation and they're going to do something illegal or their own inner law immoral. But how few actually can summon up the courage to do that. And I said, we have a way we can help them, and that is we make sure that they have missions, that they can act legally and they can act morally. That's our task as citizens. And the students went out. And I wrote to Dawn, and I said, how did everything go? You know, we had another class later on. Everything went fine. And they want me to come back. They'd like me to come back in the fall and talk about Peekskill and talk about all the other towns I visited. Now that's 2 coins. Good things come in threes. And the fairies always like it when we speak of threes. And the third coin brings me to Peekskill. It's a little medallion. And I have medallions all around I've been given Medjugorje medals, I've been given the St. Christopher medal by a student of mine who wore it all during the Olympics when he was an Olympic luge competitor. I've been given a Turkish glass thing to ward off evil spirits. All these wonderful gifts that I've been given along the road. This is the most recent gift, and I must tell you this story. So this morning, I had spent the night at West Point, a guest of the head of counterterrorism for West Point. In my wildest imagination, I never imagined being invited onto the campus, given a red carpet tour, and then put up by somebody who worked at the academy. A guy who told me, my job is to never trust anyone, whereas I had just told him over a beer that he's bought me in Cornwall, that by trusting everyone and accepting every invitation, I felt an extraordinary spiritual presence that's carried me from place to place to place. And Chris, he gave himself totally to me. So I wake up this morning and I set out on the road to Peekskill. And I know I have to be here by noon, and it's a long way to go. I'm at the very end, the north end of the West Point campus. And it had occurred to me on Friday night when I was in Cornwall and met all these extraordinary people, that as I came through near here, I would be going past Bear Mountain and going past the Trailside Museum. How many of you have been to the Trailside Museum? Anybody been to the Trailside Museum? Extraordinary place, right? The birthplace of the Appalachian Trail, the first nature trail in America there. And that incredible Walt Whitman statue with his poem, Camerado. And I thought, Jack, a friend of mine, a guy I dedicated a book to 10 years ago, I haven't talked to in 10 years. I thought, I know he's retired. I tried to find his number, and all I could find on the internet was it said something about, it said Highland Falls. So I think, oh, he's Highland Falls. That's where I am. But I was so busy trying to get through the town of Highland Falls to get to Peekskill this morning that I completely forgot to ask anyone, because I couldn't find a phone number for him. The information, it said unlisted. And so I passed, in the morning I was passing people on the street, and I just completely forgot to stop anyone to ask. And I actually get through the town, I'm out on the outskirts going past the motels, and I think, oh, I forgot to look for Jack. And so I go back, and I think I'm going to go to that gas station, and I'm just going to ask at that one gas station and see. And at that moment, I see the policeman rounding the corner, and I whistle to him. I go over and I say, do you know Jack Folk? And he says, no, I don't know Jack Folk. Nobody here by that name. And so my heart sinks, and I think, well, I'm going to go on. And I step onto the road. I go down. I'm now leaving Highland Falls quite a distance behind me. And I've done my job. I think I'm not going to find Jack. And I'm going along, and I see this man in a funny jacket and a hat. He's standing kind of as if he's waiting. And a little voice says to me, ask him. I said, excuse me, do you know Jack Folk? No. And at that moment, a black BMW pulls up. And he says, maybe she will. And he opens the door, and he says, Rita, do you know Jack Folk? She says, yeah, I'm on my way to sing with him at the Blessed Sacrament Church in Fort Montgomery. May I have a ride? Oh, sure, put your packet. Jack Folk was my totem pole for understanding the history of the Rampo Mountains, the Harriman State Park. Great naturalist, a man who knows all the birds, all of the flora and fauna of this great mountain range right across the river. And a man who, for the couple of years that I knew him and the intense time I knew him, all we ever talked about was science, natural science, and history. And so I go, I'm so excited to see him again, and just, I think, to see an old friend on this long pilgrimage would be a wonderful thing. And